Hello everybody, this is Talon with the next Nutrition Tier List, a series where I break down all the options in a given food group and rank them based on how nutritious they are and how they impact your health. Today we're looking at fats and oils, an often overlooked part of many people's diets, yet one that can have one of the greatest impacts calorically. As the name would suggest, fats and oils are made pretty much entirely of one type of macronutrient, fat. Fats are unique in the sense that they provide 9 calories per gram and have several functions that are necessary for the body to perform at its best. Everything from cell membrane structure, to absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, to maintenance of nervous function, to the synthesis of myelin, to the regulation of cholesterol and blood pressure, to the preservation of your heart, to the combating of inflammation, to simply being used as an energy source. I hate to break it to those people on super low-fat diets, but you're missing out a little bit. I understand with fats it can be very easy to overindulge, but it's also very possible to underindulge. That being said, not all fats are created equally. There's 2, but really 3, but really 4 main types of fats that you'll see in the foods you eat regularly and on the items I'll be featuring on this list. There's monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, saturated, and trans fats, which I often compare to the green light, yellow light, and red light of the fat world respectively. Monounsaturated fats are generally the most widely accepted to be healthy, especially for your heart. Polyunsaturated fats also generally share that green light distinction and contain a couple of notable fatty acid types, omega-3s and omega-6s, which the body cannot make on its own. You'll often hear people talk about how these are necessary but ideal in a certain ratio. I'll get to more about that later. Saturated fats have the most complicated history, showing to be necessary for optimal function but potentially hazardous in higher amounts. As I hope to show you today, as with a yellow light, sometimes you slow down and sometimes you speed up. And then there's trans fats, which 99 times out of 100 are so bad for you that I made an entire video discussing why. Trans fats are banned in the States, and since I get my numbers from the USDA, they're not going to come up that often, but I will discuss them when I feel it's necessary. The thing is, fats and oils are not as simple as this one contains monounsaturated fats. Good. This one contains saturated fats. Bad. Not only does every cooking fat and oil contain a blend of these, but each can be broken down into different fatty acid types and lengths and processes, each with their own histories, benefits, drawbacks, and mixed bag of studies. I'm going to tell you straight up, this was the hardest tier list to date. Thousands of people have given their takes on a very similar concept. This is just my best interpretation of it all. So with that all being said, looking at the tiers for this video, we're going to be comparing the nutritional content and benefits of each fat and oil against any shortcomings or health concerns that they may possess. Keep in mind that these lists are ranked independent of each other, so an A-tier oil may not equate to an A-tier meat or an A-tier fruit. All numerical nutritional information on this list and across this series will be based on 100 grams of the individual food, but I hope I don't need to be the one to tell you that you probably shouldn't be consuming that much. This is simply for consistency and ease of comparison. To put it in perspective, most of the serving sizes for items on this list fall under 20 grams and often far less. Now I want to touch on a few things before getting into the list proper. First off, this video is only going to be going over oils typically used in cooking or as dressings and such, so no fish oils as those are most commonly taken as supplements. The next thing is something called the smoking point. Every fat and oil has one, and it's where, as the name would suggest, it starts to smoke. This isn't necessarily the end of the world, but smoking is evidence of the fat breaking down, potentially releasing chemicals and oxidizing free radicals. So it's generally not recommended that you cook above the smoke point, thus different fats and oils have different uses. The last point is refined versus unrefined oils, and this one's pretty straightforward. Due to the often heated nature of the refinement of most oils, unrefined oils are generally a healthier, more nutritious, and more authentic pick. This, however, typically comes at the cost of a much lower smoke point. And with all that out of the way, it's time to show off my efforts burning the midnight oil and get to the list. First on this list, we've got almond oil. Almond oil is typically very high in monounsaturated fat. It's primarily made up of the omega-9 fatty acid oleic acid. That oleic acid has been widely accepted to be beneficial for heart health, managing cholesterol levels, and reducing the risk of heart disease. Almond oil as a whole has been shown to manage blood sugar and blood pressure levels. And almond oil is very high in vitamin E, an antioxidant that's shown to benefit hair and skin and lower risks of certain chronic diseases. Really, the only thing to watch out for is that unrefined almond oil has a pretty low smoke point at about 225 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 105 degrees Celsius, and thus it's not recommended for cooking. The temperatures for refined almond oil are on screen and they're a bit more forgiving. Overall, almond oil is a solid choice that you can consume generally without worry, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. Avocado oil is primarily made up of monounsaturated fat. Its primary fatty acid is oleic acid, which is shown to be heart healthy and reduces the risk of certain chronic diseases while having a positive impact on cholesterol. Avocado oil is typically high in vitamin E and is a solid source of lutein, a carotenoid antioxidant that the body uses mainly to preserve eye health. Avocado oil is also shown to reduce joint inflammation and pain from arthritis. One of the safest and consistently most heart-promoting oils out there, I'm going to put avocado oil in the top tier. Butter is mainly made up of saturated fat. Its primary fatty acid is the longer-chain saturated fatty acid palmitic acid. The saturated fats in butter have long been controversial, associated with heart issues, particularly artery clogging. However, the link between the saturated fat found in butter and the risk of heart disease is generally so much lower in more recent studies, it's insane. The main saturated fats in butter to discuss are palmitic acid and stearic acid, which are shown to have a neutral to slightly positive effect on LDL cholesterol, mainly influencing less dangerous, larger LDL particles. And butyric acid, a short-chain fatty acid that's shown to reduce intestinal inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and aid in treating IBS. And saturated fats as a whole are still linked to improved bone, liver, brain, and immune health in controlled amounts. Grass-fed butter does also contain conjugated linoleic acid, a ruminant trans fat that some studies show aid in weight loss and as an anti-cancer. However, to me, butter is not entirely in the clear, as most studies have shown diets consisting of mainly saturated fats still have a higher likelihood to lead to heart issues than diets consisting of mainly unsaturated fats. And I, for one, am not holding my breath waiting for that to change. Butter is also not advised to be consumed by people who are allergic to milk protein, but those who are lactose intolerant should generally be safe due to how little milk sugar is left over. Overall, I'm going to put butter in the B tier. It definitely has its place, but if you're a huge butter fanatic, it probably wouldn't hurt to swap it with some of the higher tier vegetable oils sometimes. Canola oil, also called rapeseed oil, but I'm not going to call it that, is mainly made up of monounsaturated fats, with the main fatty acid being oleic acid and the next most prominent being the omega-6 linoleic acid. First off, canola oil is a solid source of vitamin E and vitamin K, and its oleic acid content is generally heart-healthy. Canola oil also contains a solid amount of linolenic acid, an omega-3 used for various bodily functions like hormone creation. It should be mentioned that this version of omega-3 needs to be converted before being used, so it's not as useful as, say, the omega-3s in seafood, but every little bit definitely helps. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is generally considered safe on its own as well. Now, some studies have shown a pretty strong link between canola oil and inflammation and oxidative stress, while others see nothing. Overall, this is an oil that I'm going to say can and should be used in moderation, and I'm going to put it in the B tier. Chicken fat is a fairly balanced blend of our three main types of fat. Poultry fats are notably lower in saturated fat than other animal-based options like butter, lard, and tallow. And chicken fat is notably the highest in polyunsaturated fats of all the animal fats, mainly coming in the form of the omega-6 linoleic acid. Still, with a hefty amount of oleic acid, most studies on chicken fat find it to be heart-healthy upon consumption, having a consistent LDL-lowering effect. Chicken fat is also higher in choline, which is needed for the synthesis of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine and other functions like lipid transportation. And it's shown to have a positive effect on skin, hair, and nail health. The only real potential downside of chicken fat is still the link between animal-based long-chain saturated fatty acids, in this case palmitic acid, and a precursor for cholesterol and heart issues. And even then, this is still one of your best bets in terms of animal fats. I'm going to put chicken fat in the A tier. It still maybe shouldn't be your go-to, but the upsides are definitely there. Coconut oil is probably the most controversial item on this list, and is by far the highest in saturated fat. It's mainly made up of a unique medium-chain saturated fatty acid called lauric acid, but contains several other types of saturated fatty acids, including two other notable medium-chain fatty acids, caprylic acid and capric acid. Medium-chain triglycerides, specifically lauric acid, are linked with weight loss, specifically fat burning when compared to other saturated fats, a reduced risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, antimicrobial and antifungal properties, and it's mainly used for energy, functioning similarly to carbohydrates in that way. Coconut oil as a whole is a good source of antioxidants like tocopherols, flavonoids, and polyphenols, which have anti-inflammatory and brain protective benefits. As for cholesterol and heart health, it's still a bit of a mixed bag. Some more recent studies show consistent HDL increases and LDL decreases, which is ideal, but most studies throughout history, of which there are many, show LDL increases. There does still seem to be a general consensus that this is one of the oils that too much is a bad thing and too much can come quicker than most other oils. But opinions on coconut oil have changed drastically over the last couple decades, I believe mainly due to the uniqueness of its medium-chain saturated fatty acids. And if there's one item on this list I have hopeful optimism for, this is it. That all to say, I'm going to put coconut oil in the B tier. Corn oil is mainly made up of polyunsaturated fat, the biggest contributor being the omega-6 linoleic acid. But before I break that down, corn oil has a pretty high amount of vitamin E, and is rich in phytosterols that have anti-inflammatory effects, notably beta-sitosterol, which is shown to help decrease overall blood cholesterol levels. But getting back to omega-6, if there's one thing you've heard about polyunsaturated fats, is that there's two subtypes that your body cannot make on its own: omega-3s and omega-6s. Both of these are needed for optimal bodily function, with omega-6s like linoleic acid being used to stimulate skin and hair health, maintain bone health, regulate metabolism, and maintain reproductive health. The catch is that the ratio at which you consume omega-3s and omega-6s is important, as it has been shown that too much omega-6 to omega-3 can result in inflammation and various chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, and Alzheimer's. Ideally, you get as close to a 1-to-1 ratio as possible, but a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is still generally considered safe. The problem is that the average Western diet typically sees a ratio of about 15-to-1, and oils like corn oil are not helping in that case. They definitely have their place, especially if you're aware of all the ways that this ratio can be offset, but realistically you can do so much better than corn oil. It has its merits, but I'm going to put it in the D tier. Cottonseed oil is mainly made up of polyunsaturated fat, with the most prominent fatty acid once again being linoleic acid. It's a solid source of vitamin E and vitamin K, and is shown to overall contribute positive effects on cholesterol, consistently showing to lower LDL levels. But the main point to pay attention to is those omega-6s. Again, they're necessary for skin, bone, and reproductive health, but cottonseed oil is definitely not helping balance that ratio to help prevent potential inflammation. Again, you can do better than cottonseed oil, and I'm going to put it in the D tier. Duck fat is another fairly balanced poultry fat. It's mainly made up of the consistently heart-healthy oleic acid, and is notably highest in saturated fat among the poultry fats, but is still lower than butter, lard, and tallow. Duck fat is shown to lower LDL cholesterol, and as a whole reduce risks of certain chronic diseases. Duck fat is also higher in choline, which is needed for the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Again, the relevant amount of animal-based saturated fat still gives many people pause, but duck fat is still one of the better options even for this, and comes with its own distinct benefits. While you probably shouldn't cook exclusively with duck fat, I'm going to put it in the A tier. Flaxseed oil is mainly made up of polyunsaturated fat, but does something really novel by having most of it being the omega-3 fatty acid, linolenic acid. And the main draw of flaxseed oil is that linolenic acid, which is shown to boost heart health, reduce inflammation, and lower risks of certain cancers while easing symptoms of arthritis. It's also a solid source of vitamin E, which is used for skin health and wound healing. Now, unfortunately, the main draw here, the omega-3s, does come with a couple caveats. Alpha-linolenic acid, as found in flaxseed oil, is a nice omega-3 boost, but the conversion to use rate is fairly poor compared to those found in seafood and fish oils, and thus those are still highly suggested. The other issue is that flaxseed oil has a very low smoke point, and is thus not recommended for cooking. Just drizzle it over a salad or something. But overall, flaxseed oil is one of those oils that simply doesn't really seem to do anything wrong, and one that you can freely use regularly without much worry. Thus, I'm going to put it in the A tier. Ghee is clarified butter made by separating butterfat from milk solids and water. Thus, it's primarily made of saturated fat and somewhat resembles butter. Like butter, the main fatty acids to pay attention to are palmitic acid, stearic acid, and butyric acid, with the first two being your typical longer-chain animal fats, having a generally neutral effect on cholesterol, and butyric acid being a shorter-chain acid shown to reduce intestinal inflammation, treat IBS, and improve insulin sensitivity. The medium-chain and shorter-chain triglycerides are consistently shown to be more beneficial. Ghee consistently contains more vitamin A than butter, which is mainly used for eye health and preservation, and conjugated linoleic acid, a natural trans fat shown to aid with fat loss. Ghee also contains a way higher smoke point and is virtually guaranteed to be lactose-free. While the differences are subtle, ghee is just the better butter, and I think it's earned a spot in the A tier. Goose fat is mainly made up of monounsaturated fat. In fact, it's the highest in monounsaturated fats of all the animal fats on this list, mainly being oleic acid. That oleic acid is shown to benefit heart health by managing cholesterol levels and reducing the risk of heart disease. Goose fat is a good source of choline and is the lowest in saturated fat of all the animal fats on this list. It still maybe shouldn't be your go-to, but as a whole, I'm going to put goose fat in the A tier. Grapeseed oil is mainly made up of polyunsaturated fats. In fact, it's the highest on this list in polyunsaturated fats and by extension omega-6 fatty acids. Those omega-6s, namely linoleic acid, are overall good for cholesterol and play key roles in skin, bone, and reproductive health. And grapeseed oil is high in vitamin E, an antioxidant known for its skin health benefits. However, grapeseed oil is the worst culprit for throwing off your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which, when left unchecked, can lead to inflammation and various chronic diseases. And so grapeseed oil finds itself in the D tier with some of the other seed oils. Hazelnut oil is made almost entirely of monounsaturated fats, namely oleic acid, our resident heart-healthy fatty acid that's shown to manage cholesterol levels and blood pressure and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. It's also one of the best sources on this list of vitamin E, an antioxidant used for skin health and wound healing. I don't know why hazelnut oil isn't talked about more because it's nothing short of amazing. I'm going to put it in the top tier. Lard is a mix of fatty acid types, mainly monounsaturated and saturated fats. I love how what I thought was the most stereotypically saturated fat-full item on this list isn't even mainly made up of saturated fat. And the saturated fats found in lard, palmitic and stearic acid, contribute primarily a neutral effect on cholesterol anyways. One that gets outshined by the heart-healthy oleic acid we've discussed so much. It's not going to contribute much to your omega-3s or omega-6s and has a nice little vitamin boost to go along with it. Lard is about as middle of the road in every aspect as far as fats go, and I honestly don't understand why it gets such a bad reputation. I wouldn't say use it all the time, but in moderation it shouldn't cause any harm in a well-balanced diet. And for that, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Margarine is generally made up of a blend of different types of fats. It's usually made from vegetable oils, namely corn, cottonseed, safflower, soy, and sunflower oils. Now, modern-day margarine is mainly made up of our heart-healthy oleic acid, and that's about where the good ends. Traditional margarine is basically synonymous with partial hydrogenation and the presence of risky trans fats. It's usually highly processed and infused with chemicals and preservatives. And all of this still applies to margarine in many of the countries outside of the States. However, since trans fats were banned in the US recently, companies have started using a couple other processes to achieve the desirable butter-like texture from vegetable oils. The first is just full hydrogenation, creating artificial solid saturated fats as opposed to semi-solid trans fats. And while this concept is still fairly young, so far it's not seeming much better. The other is called interestification, which is hardened by combining saturated fats and unsaturated oils. And while the jury's still primarily out on this one, I'm not holding my breath for it to be much better. Overall, there's just no real reason to use margarine if you care at all about your health, especially with so many other safer, more studied, and more nutritious options. And because of that, it's going in the F tier. Olive oil is overwhelmingly made up of monounsaturated fats, particularly the generally agreed upon to be heart-healthy oleic acid. Oleic acid is great for managing cholesterol levels, raising HDL and lowering LDL, and is shown to lower blood pressure levels and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. Olive oil also has notable links to reduced risk of certain cancers, certain respiratory diseases, and type 2 diabetes. It's a pretty solid source of vitamin K, which is mainly used for blood clotting, and vitamin E, an antioxidant known for its skin health benefits. Olive oil also contains a wide array of phenolic compounds, phytochemicals with anti-inflammatory properties, notably oleocanthal, which seems to have a protective effect against Alzheimer's disease. The main draw of the popular extra virgin olive oil is less refinement and a higher concentration of fat-soluble vitamins and antioxidants. And the only notable drawback of extra virgin olive oil is that it's not recommended for super high heat cooking. Overall, olive oil stands the test of time as one of the best cooking fats there is, and it's earned a spot in the top tier. Palm oil is mainly made up of saturated fats, followed closely by monounsaturated fat. The palmitic acid found in palm oil is shown to have a neutral to slightly negative effect in regards to cholesterol, but studies on how palm oil affects overall heart health are all across the board, with some studies showing protection against heart diseases and even going as far as to say its LDL lowering effect is comparable to that of olive oil. But the majority of them are not nearly that positive. Palm oil does contain tocotrienols, a form of vitamin E known for its brain protective benefits. The thing is, you can usually just do a lot better than palm oil, and while it's probably better than the typical seed oil, I'm going to put it in the C tier. Peanut oil is mainly monounsaturated fats, specifically the heart-healthy oleic acid. In fact, the high overall unsaturated fat concentration leads peanut oil to be very heart-healthy. On top of that, peanut oil is shown to improve insulin sensitivity. The thing is, that omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is literally non-existent, and in excess can lead to some serious inflammation. Overall, peanut oil is a fine oil to use in moderation, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. Rice bran oil is a mix of fat, mainly mono and polyunsaturated. The two main fatty acids are oleic and linoleic acids, both of which are shown to overall improve cholesterol levels and heart health. Rice bran oil contains an impressive amount of vitamin E, an antioxidant known for its skin health and wound healing effects. It also contains oryzanol, which is shown to suppress inflammation and to a lesser extent enhance immune response. But rice bran oil is often highly processed, so these nutrients are usually a bit hampered. And even at its best, rice bran oil still has a high amount of omega-6 and realistically very little omega-3. Not the worst choice in the world, but I'm going to put rice bran oil in the C tier. Safflower oil is an interesting subject. It comes in two main varieties, high oleic and high linoleic, with the primary fatty acids in each being pretty self-explanatory. These are the numbers for the better and seemingly more common high oleic safflower oil. At its highest, safflower oil has just as much oleic acid as other vegetable oils like avocado and olive oil. That oleic acid is overall HDL boosting and LDL lowering, while also shown to reduce inflammation and manage blood pressure. Both types of safflower oil are pretty high in vitamin E, but high linoleic safflower oil more closely resembles other seed oils with a crazy high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, potentially contributing to inflammation or raising chances of certain chronic diseases. This makes a pretty drastic difference. So I'm going to put high oleic safflower oil in the A tier, but high linoleic safflower oil would be more at home in the C tier. Sesame oil is a pretty even split between mono and polyunsaturated fat, those mainly being oleic and linoleic acids, both of which are shown to generally be heart healthy. And just like sesame seeds, sesame oil has a lot going for it under the surface. Sesame oil is known for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties, shown to reduce blood pressure and regulate blood sugar. Its antioxidant sesamol is shown to have neuroprotective benefits and help prevent Parkinson's disease. Sesame oil is also shown to improve symptoms of arthritis. It does have the issue of an awful omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, potentially leading to inflammation, but it's probably the best of the oils that have that issue, and for that, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Vegetable shortening is a pretty even blend between saturated and monounsaturated fats. It's usually made from cottonseed, palm, or soybean oils. Much like margarine, traditional shortening was once defined by its trans fats, and even though those are banned in the States, many vegetable shortenings in other countries will still contain them. These days, shortening is often created through full hydrogenation, making artificial saturated fats. An interestification which chemically messes with a variety of pre-existing fatty acids to mimic taste and texture. Both of these processes are still relatively new in shortening, and while they're in theory better than trans fats, there haven't been enough human studies to confirm this. All in all, to I assume no one's surprise, shortening is not going to be escaping the F tier. Soybean oil is mainly made up of polyunsaturated fats, specifically the omega-6 linoleic acid. This is shown to be generally heart-healthy and beneficial for cholesterol. Soybean oil is a great source of vitamin K, which is mainly known for blood clotting, and it's also shown to support bone health. However, like many other oils on this list, in excess it can cause an unevenness between your omega-3s and your omega-6s. And for that, I'm going to put soybean oil in the C tier. Sunflower oil is very similar to safflower oil in the sense that it comes in two main types, high oleic and high linoleic, with each typically representing at least 70% of the fatty acid makeup. Once again, we'll be looking at the high oleic option more closely, which is shown to be beneficial for cholesterol and heart health while combating inflammation. It's also among the highest of the oils in vitamin E. In a very similar fashion, high linoleic sunflower oil is reminiscent of the other seed oils, with a wickedly high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, potentially leading to inflammation if left unchecked. So I'm going to be putting high oleic sunflower oil in the A tier, while high linoleic would be in the C tier. Beef tallow is a pretty even split between saturated and monounsaturated fat, with the main contributors being oleic, palmitic, and stearic acids. The oleic acid in tallow is shown to be generally heart healthy, and so are the typically minimally processed saturated fatty acids. Tallow is a good source of choline, just not as much as the poultry fats. But tallow does excel in being rich in conjugated linoleic acid, a natural ruminant trans fat shown to aid with weight loss. Tallow is also shown to be good for skin health. Overall, tallow is a solid fat choice that I think often goes under the radar. I'm going to put it in the B tier. And last on this list, we've got walnut oil. Walnut oil is primarily made up of polyunsaturated fat, with an actually decent amount of it being the omega-3 linolenic acid. Linolenic acid is shown to be heart protective and stress and inflammation reducing. Walnut oil is also high in polyphenols, notably L-arginins, which have anti-inflammatory and blood sugar regulatory properties. It's also shown to lead to better cognitive function. Now, walnut oil still has a pretty high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, but one that's a bit safer than most polyunsaturated fat-dominant oils. The main downside to walnut oil is that it's not really recommended for cooking, but overall I think this is a really underutilized choice that's going to round out our list in the B tier. So fats and oils, literally calories incarnate. To some, a necessary evil, and to others, the part that makes or breaks a meal. I think we can all agree that we need fats in our diet, and I think we can all agree that we need somewhat of a variety of them as well. Just in the same way that you can't build a proper house without both brick and mortar, you can't build a proper body without different types of fats. And even though you may need more of one than another, it doesn't make the other parts inferior or any less necessary. Just as with anything in life or nutrition, balance is required. Except trans fats, those still suck. But I think beyond those relatively vague and mostly affable claims, I'm going to have a hard time keeping everybody on the same page. There's no denying that this is one of the most controversial topics in nutrition, and I've been putting this list off for a while. I don't think you're stupid if you disagree with me. There's so much conflicting information out there. The most important part is making an active effort to understand why we consume what we consume. And if you can feel confident in justifying a choice, that's really all most of us can do right now. Now, if you enjoyed the video, or at the very least learned a little something, I encourage you to subscribe because there's plenty more of these on the way. Let me know which food group you think I should make a tier list for next, and remember that all I ask is that you advocate for your body. You only get the one.